Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Christian W. Cipollini. What's up, man?
Mr. Staxx, thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time for me, man. So, a lot of people don't, a lot of people know who you are, but a lot of my fans might not know who you are. So, you're an author. You wrote a lot of books about mob related content. I noticed that you have a don't you have a children's book too?
No children's book for me yet. I have kids, but I've never ventured there yet. No.
Or you have comic books?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I guess they're not really for kids when you think about it. It's not too bad, but yeah.
It's like adult content for the
Yeah. I mean, preferably 17 and up, I guess. But yeah, nothing too explicit. But it is the mob. I mean, this isn't exactly a subject for 3-year-olds, so.
yeah. So I want to get into some of your story today, and if everyone that's watching, if you want to check out his book, you can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and you can download his book. You want to tell them the names of your book?
Yeah, Diary of a Motor City Hitman, Chester Wheeler Campbell story, Lucky Luciano, and one on Murder
Thank
Inc.,
you.
and of course the Lucky comic book series. So if you want to check it out, they're all on Amazon, and I think most are on Barnes and Noble. Once my website's back up, I'll have autographed copies, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So, um, where were you born and raised?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a Steel City kid.
I was just in Pittsburgh not too long ago. I like the city, man. It's a pretty nice spot.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, when you live there, you bitch about stuff, from that area. But no, there's a lot of good things about Pittsburgh. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, everybody, my whole family is Steelers fans. Go
yeah.
Steelers, man. Shout out
That's
to my brother.
diehard. You find them everywhere too. I'm out in California now, and there's Pittsburgh Steeler fans here. So,
Yeah. So what was it like growing up for you in Pittsburgh?
um, growing up for me was, it was actually pretty normal. I guess whatever normal is, not really. I don't know. My dad. And I tell this story a lot, so anyone that doesn't know or heard it, I apologize. But my dad was a narcotics cop, and we grew up. Yeah, this is a true story. So I grew up about 25 miles outside the city. So if you've ever been to Western Pennsylvania, it's the city, and then rural, kind of suburban, and we were like, what I would say is, I don't know, it was like this juxtaposition of rural and pockets of tiny metropolitan areas. So my childhood was, I don't know, I guess, again, I hate to use the word normal, but whatever. Anyway, my dad was a narcotics cop. He didn't talk about work a lot. We just thought it was kind of cool that he did these like secret missions, whatever, that kind of stuff. Um, and a lot of people think that's what got me into this. It did in a weird way, but not directly. Like, here's another story I tell, and I will say, I sucked at everything as a kid. I sucked at sports. I sucked at math. I sucked at science. I couldn't, whatever. My dad was like good at everything, and whatever. I found out young I was a good writer. Like, I didn't know what the hell you do with that, but I knew I could write way better than I spoke.
Yeah.
So, time goes on, not to bore everybody, but what my dad did for a living and some of the other side experiences I got, particularly in my teen years from some friends. And anyway, those things kind of start the fire that one day down the road, oh, I'm going to write about the other side of society.
Yeah.
You had my dad's influence, and then you had some of my friends' influence. But a lot of it was reading. I got into my late teens, and I started reading every book about I don't know, crime, biographies, economic books, and you realize organized crime is sort of like woven into our fabric. I don't know, for better or worse, but this is the
Yeah.
case. And it kind of drew me in more. And then I'll just say, what was it, late 80s or 90, John Gotti appears on the more national scene. And I don't know if this is bad to say, but I was kind of drawn to that. Like, wow, who is this guy? Got to find out. Voila, years later, it becomes my job is to, is more of a historian.
Did
So,
you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you got out of high school and what you had in
oh
mind
my
for a
God,
career?
no, I was a shit show. I mean, look, I did pretty good in school. I did. I wasn't like the greatest student. I wasn't the worst student. I did pretty good, particularly in the language areas. But I had no idea. I got out of high school. I picked a college. I went there and got kicked out like a year and a half later. And it wasn't, I don't have any grand story why. I don't know. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I just kind of screwed off. And then I felt really bad and brooded about it for a while, and then worked like real people, in a job for years. And jump ahead, I went back to college like when I was, I don't know, 28, 30, 29, somewhere around there. I went back to school at night, and I realized I love journalism. Like, it took me that long. You talk about late bloomers. It's never too late, kids. See, um, yeah.
Yeah, you
So,
you
and
can change your life and do anything, man, anytime.
you know it. You know this, and that's what I did. I didn't think of it as some grand scheme. It took me a while, and I found my thing. I found my thing, I guess. So,
Yeah, once you get into the niche of writing, it's like it becomes. I love to write different things, man. I have different. I don't know. It's I enjoy it. But
you have
so
to have a passion for anything. And mine was writing. I do love it, but I also learned you can't force certain things. Not to go into a rabbit hole about this, but I thought I'd be a fiction writer. You asked what, like, really, I thought I will write screenplays or magical stories. And just like poetry, if you try to force that kind of thing,
yeah,
it's going to be visible to the reader and yourself if you're honest. And I didn't know until I went back to college. And oh, wait, all the books I read, a lot of them at least, were biographical, historical. Why don't I try that? And the true crime, that was the natural element burning inside. So,
I want to talk about your first book that you wrote,
okay. Diary of a Motor
Diary of
City
Motor
Hitman.
City Hitman. So what what went into writing this book, and like what made you decide to go with this one out of all directions you could have went?
I think, like any of us who love consuming this kind of material, that you can count on, you'd need four sets of hands to count how many books about each individual gangster or whatever there is. I happen to, this true story. I started collecting original mugshots, press photos, historical ones. It was kind of like a hobby. And one day I'm on an auction site and saw this 1975 photo of, seriously at the time, the most badass looking dude I had ever seen in a photo. And on the back of the photo, the editor had written Detroit Hitman Chester Wheeler Campbell. I bought this photo, kid you not, $9. I get the photo, and that's when I started into the old newspaper archives. Like, who the hell was this guy?
Yeah.
And turned out I went to a small publisher who I had some networking with, and I said, hey, I'd like to propose a book. And he kind of said, hey, if you can find a whole book worth on this guy or his friends, you got a deal.
So
So like
you had to
here,
dig out all the information
oh yeah,
about him and find out everything.
yeah, yeah, and it was hard. He was an interesting character because outside of Detroit, it's not a name that most people know.
I've
Um,
never heard of him before.
right. And it's kind of a shame in a way because as I describe him when the book came out, I said he was like the 007 of the Detroit underworld. Here was, and think of the time period, 1970s, you have a black man who's working not just for the African American segment of organized crime, he's also working for the Italian segment. That,
Yeah.
you know, again, we're talking the era where this was sadly, but unheard of that you would have this guy. He was that good, though, at what he did. And I'm not trying to glorify it. It's just, wow.
Do you
He
want to
was
give
like a
us a little
master.
rundown on who Chester Wheeler Campbell was?
Chester, in a nutshell, was a professional assassin in Detroit. And if you know anything about Detroit, particularly in the 1960s and 70s, there was a lot going on, particularly with organized crime. You had the drug factions, you had the mafia, you had the whole Jimmy Hoffa thing was going on at the same time. And all these characters were loosely interconnected. And Chester was the kind of guy that literally frightened the authorities because it wasn't his cache of weapons that frightened them so much. This guy knew the real power is in knowledge. In other words, just an example, he gets arrested in 75, and in his trunk, besides weapons, drugs, and money, they find uh, grand jury transcripts. And for those of you that don't know, sealed grand jury transcripts are not something anyone should have their hands on, and yet he had it. In other words, to find witnesses that needed eliminated. Uh, this guy kept records of the good guys. He kept records of the bad guys. He kept records of his friends' enemies. It scared everybody that someone had basically that much power. So yeah, some called him Doctor Death. I talked to a few old heads from the era that said, yeah, when Chester walked into a room with other guys, you knew it wasn't good. Like that guy didn't say much, but his presence alone let you know something isn't good here.
Well, then,
Interesting, super intelligent. A lot of people later said he should have gone to law school. Like if he had not been a hitman, he would have made an amazing lawyer.
yeah, a lot of these people, man, they could have made a crazy living doing something else, like in a
Mm-hmm.
corporate world or sales or something.
Yeah, yeah. He
But
he really fascinated me. And on that note, I mean, I think the book it's broad too because there was so much going on. Also, I'll just plug this now. It's not even really plugging me, but Gangsters America's Most Evil, the show, the new
yeah,
season just got announced. It starts in April. All I can say is you're going to meet Chester in one of the episodes, probably midway through the season. But I'm pretty excited because I filmed for it and they're fine. They did a whole episode about this guy. And you're going to see he's pretty interesting dude.
so what ended up happening to Chester?
Oh, without giving everything away, and you notice, Bill, endings of gangster stories are usually not very romantic like they would be
Yeah.
in a Hollywood story. Jail, death, some retire. Chester's case was, again, I don't want to give everything away, um, unceremonious, kind of sad way to go out. It wasn't in a mob hit. He didn't retire. Medical. Let's just say it was medical, and people can see. But it kind of reflects the risks of the life he had lived before he went to prison for the final time. Again, I know it's vague. I don't want to give it all away.
So after you wrote that book, what was your what was the next step to write your next book, and what book was the next one you wrote?
That was Lucky Luciano, and anyone who knows me knows that one is the close. Yeah, that one's to the vest. Luciano has always, at least since I was in my early 20s, was sort of, I guess, an obsession. I don't know how else to put it. Probably because when I was young, I bought a used copy of The Last Testament of Lucky Luciano. Okay, this was the book written in the 70s that was allegedly his words.
Do you
Great
believe
book.
that? Do you believe
Oh,
it?
well, that's the thing. So I'm like, this is the greatest book ever. And I have a first edition. I still own it. I'm still. And then you find out from historians that, yeah, that book might have been about 60% bullshit. That that was the linchpin moment, the thing that drove me to try to find the needles in the haystack. Don't I have no idea why, not to sound like some nut that's obsessed, but I am. That was the guy I wanted to write a more reader friendly, even people who aren't into this, kind of cool anecdotal, like, did you know? Like, in because he, I think, was like Capone, very relevant in 20th century history, period. I mean,
Yeah.
that guy was part of the whole change of the mob landscape.
I
So
think he
yeah,
was
that,
part of this whole country's change. He was part of
yes,
the whole evolution of with the prohibition and everything, how everything evolved and how he helped the military. It was a lot that went into it.
right. And we don't even know all the answers, which is the great thing about history in general. But when you're talking about the mob, it always has corners where light isn't quite shed yet. That
Yeah.
people like me, like, this never fails to happen. Ask anybody who's ever written anything. As soon as you hit the send button to your editor,
You find
is
something
when,
new.
yeah,
You hear
you're like,
something
you're
new. Oh,
kidding
did
me,
you know this about him?
right?
And you're like, oh man, I wanted
That's
to.
why we did the part of why we did the comic book series too, because I wanted to add in some other fun, interesting, scary kind of stuff. But yeah, Luciano was my next book, and that one does really well. It's kind of fun. I filled it with a lot of photos, some really rare. But it's not just about him. I think, Bill, what I want people to really understand, and you know this too, no matter who the figurehead is of the time, whether it's El Chapo, Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, John Gotti, it's never one person. There's always a poster boy or poster girl, but it's the ensemble cast. I know my colleagues get annoyed. I always use the word ensemble cast, but that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's
Because,
all the people around that are keeping the
yes,
people alive and keeping them moving. Basically,
exactly. And
keeping them.
some of their stories are bizarrely fascinating in and of themselves. Like I always say, I'm not bad mouthing Hollywood at all. It's just Hollywood couldn't even create some of the truth that's stranger than fiction in these stories. I think that's what makes me so passionate about it too. It's relevant to even where we are today. Look at the drug war. That's a whole other topic, but that started with the guys I wrote about in the 20s. I mean, it
Yeah.
didn't start in the 70s, but I think that's why. Wait, today we're still dealing with the repercussions of decisions made in the 1930s? Yes. Yeah.
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 So, is there anything about Lucky Luciano that you wrote about that you could tell me that people might not know about him?
Um, the biggest, I guess, folklore that always still goes around is, oh, he got named Lucky because he survived being taken for a ride. Beat him up, left him for dead. He survived. Suddenly, the newspapers were, he's lucky to be alive. Yeah, no. As I found out, he actually had tattoos on his forearms, which he was very aware of hiding anytime cameras were around for whatever reason
He had
later in life. But
tattoos. I did
yeah,
not
yeah,
know
he
that.
had his right forearm was almost completely filled, and his left forearm had smaller ones. but they're significant. Besides the cool fact that Lucky Luciano had tattoos at the age of, he said 17. Doing the math, it was probably more around 13, 14 he got them. One of them said Lucky and had a horseshoe and heart. And in the comic book, we tried to show as best we could the artwork. The other arm, he had what in that era was called the nudie girl, a pinup girl,
The
arms
pinup
up.
girl,
Yeah,
yeah.
that one he hid like his life depended on it. If there was a camera and he was wearing a short sleeve shirt, you can look back through photos where he is so cognizant that one of these numbers.
Yeah, he's
Um,
aware of what's going
right.
on.
But he had the nickname as a teenager. So let's throw that out. He wasn't beaten by his rivals and left for dead and named Lucky by the press. The press ran with that, but it wasn't, the actual thing. And how he got the scars on his face, that was indeed from that beating, but he wasn't knifed, hung up. There's with the movie Mobsters. Remember that with Christian Slater? And
Yeah.
okay, that shows, his boss hung him up, and no, it was police officers looking for another gangster that Lucky was friends with, and they thought kidnapping this guy, roughing him up, he would tell them. He did not. Like he had said later in an interview in the 1950s, he told a reporter, he said, he goes, gangsters don't let you get up and walk away. It was
No.
cops. They beat him with rings, or they might have even had knuckle dusters. But
You could see his eyes a little
yeah, and the
droopy.
droopy eye. Here's
Yeah.
another thing. I'm glad you brought that up.
Look,
Not that
I got one too.
the droopy eye is something he actually was born with. Examining photos of him pre the scar, it was worse after he got scarred, but he always had a slightly droopy right eye. I mean, in the broad scheme of things, maybe that's just okay. It's a little useless factoid, but I think it's important to understand this multidimensional character that is credited with creating a mob that was more like the industrial uh, forefathers of the United States at the time, who, by the way, were bigger gangsters than the gangsters were. The
Yeah, well,
industrialists were.
he was able to take the rivals and get them out of the way, and then take all the other people and put them together and have them work together to build this big conglomerate that they had.
You think in a world before social media, how in the world did these guys get a national network, from Capone in Chicago to the Kansas City guys to the Purple Gang in Detroit? Everyone seemed to know at that time it
What to
was
do?
going
What?
down.
Yeah, they knew what to do. Like how things were working. It was
They,
pretty.
they didn't have Snapchat. Yeah, they didn't have WhatsApp. They were doing this literally by old time telephone and messages and taking a train to cities to tell each other.
Invest in yourself clothing. What's up, man? Shout out to him. We got a show coming up soon with Larry Mazza, Bobby Luisi, Paul
Nice.
Tanzo. Yeah, a lot of people. It's going to be a really good show. April 8th, that show is. Gypsy Cobra, what's up, man? Scotty Boy, what's up? I'm just running through the
Oh yeah,
comments
there's
real
a lot.
quick.
What's up, guys?
Stone Sailor, what's up, man?
Yeah, that one eye. Yeah, take a look at that eye, right?
Yeah, man. I got mine after the bar one night.
It happens. It happens. Well, yeah, like Lucky's got worse. I mean, once they did that side of his face, it was really pronounced. Oh, interesting thing too. A lot of people probably don't know. In the 50s, when he was exiled to Italy years later, one reporter, she had noted after visiting him, plastic surgery is a real thing, she said. I'm paraphrasing, because Lucky's eye is suddenly normal now. So he must have had plastic surgery. And then I went and I looked at photos of him from that era. I'll be damned. I think he did get his eye
Did he?
adjusted. Yeah.
Oh, he got the little droop
Yeah,
lifted.
fit like yeah, and I mean, again, it's neat little factoids about a dude in that era that I don't know if it's important or not. I think it's interesting, but
This is one of his mug shots, I believe.
yes,
Right?
1936.
Yeah. So those are the scars. I could see the scars on his face too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, you
oh
could
yeah,
see him.
yeah,
And then
pretty
this is
pronounced in that
he was
photo.
in Italy in this picture, right?
Yes, this would have been late 1950s, mid to late. I believe this was when he was trying to sell medical equipment. So I want to
So,
say post 55.
so what I hear is that the government was ready to arrest him as he was at the airport in Italy. They were about to arrest him for the trafficking of heroin,
Yeah,
and he had a
yeah.
heart attack as they were coming in to get him.
They had already questioned him the day before, maybe day of. He was already exhausted. The thing about that, Luciano wasn't even on the radar really outside of metropolitan New York until 1936. The FBI didn't even start a file on him until 1936. But when he was exiled in 46 for whatever alleged help he gave for the war effort, he gets to Italy, and by that time, Harry Anslinger, the drug czar, decided to make Luciano the heroin kingpin drug lord of the world. And his target was then having Italian and American agents stalk the man literally up to and including the day he died of a heart attack. Yes, there was agent present when it happened. So it
So
was
yeah,
crazy.
there's agents all around him probably. Once they know who he is and they're on his
Mm-hmm.
radar, they're probably blanketing his life, his every move.
They did because they wanted to prove he was this heroin kingpin. I can only say this. He died and they still had zero evidence to actually convince any legit historian or researcher that Luciano was pulling the strings like the Godfather puppeteer. Did he have something to do with it? I can tell you in the 1920s he was involved.
Yeah,
After that, I mean, did he? I'm sure there was some. Let's be realistic. But Anslinger and the Bureau of Narcotics, the predecessor to the DEA, they really wanted a poster boy, and they dogged him till the day he died.
kind
With
of
no
like how they singled out Capone and his family, right?
yes, well,
But
once you get set on somebody, and don't get me wrong, we're not saying oh they're good, upstanding citizens. But the government, it's kind of like, hey, they get their sights set, and that's what they did with Capone. They found a way to get him taxes. Luciano in 36, the DA discussed it, and they thought, no, let's get him on something even more guaranteed. Let's get him on a vice that no one's going to see with any kind of grace: prostitution. Did
yeah,
Lucky was Lucky a pimp? No. Did he know? Did he make money from the prostitution rackets? Most likely. But what they did is strategically place him with seven or eight other people whom he barely even knew, but were considered the dregs of
yeah, but weren't
prostitution.
didn't he have a bunch of brothels back in the day, and he was
Here's
basically
the
running
thing
the brothels and having the
about
women.
Capone had a lot of brothels. That's like known. Luciano made money from them, but was never. I mean, logistically, historically, very hard to directly connect him to the brothels. One of his co-defendants was even an individual he had ever really met in his entire life. The DA went after the prostitutes and were like, "You're going to say who the boss is, right?" Oh, you know, that guy, Lucky Luciano, that's how they did it. And they knew placing him with people who were looked down upon already
Yeah.
would make it worse. They wanted to put him in jail, is the story. I'm not, look, you want to put him in jail for all the stuff he did. That's one thing. You try to find a way. And again, I grew up in a cop household. I get it. I understand their way. I'm not trying to bash them either, but at the time, it was all about political gain. The DA, I don't think anybody can deny this. The DA at the time wanted the governor's office. He
Yeah.
was, yeah, I mean, he did. He wanted president, but he made it
Yeah.
as
And then
hard.
if they get these busts and all that, it raises their status up, right?
And you need a poster boy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a whole other subject, but even to get into the El Chapo thing, cartel leader, cartel, that's even a word we maybe shouldn't even use because it's loose. And he wasn't the only one. You know, there's a lot of people pulling strings of little groups, and it was the same back then. But
Yeah.
they needed a figurehead.
So once you got done with the Luciano book, what was the direction you were going into that after that?
That kind of segued naturally into Murder Inc. Another subject, like you, it's hard to talk about one without the
It
other.
goes on and on,
Yeah,
people. This dude's full of knowledge with the underworld.
that's yeah, Murder Inc. Those guys. Um, I would say the core group of Murder Inc. really walked a fine line between outright psychopath serial killer versus hired hitmen. And that's what they were. For anyone that doesn't know, Murder Inc. was a precedent setting kind of thing. The mob reshaped itself in 1931. By 1932, 33, the board of directors decided we need a group that can almost exclusively handle enforcement duties for us. When you're a self-policing organization, the only way to keep order, and sometimes that's through
It's like
violence.
policing yourself,
Yeah.
kind of. Yeah,
So they
Lefty
picked,
Buckalter, right?
yeah, Lepke was basically the Jewish boss. Albert Anastasia was the Italian boss, and then there was a hierarchy who to go through, pick the people, you know, that would take the phone call. Oh, I'll take that job, and they would
Yeah,
go national. These guys, but a lot of it, the core group was from Brooklyn, and it was roughly half Jewish, half Italian, give or take, and an Irish guy in there. They were.
how were they able to join this the Murder Inc? What was their stipulations to join?
That's a really good question, Bill. That's a really good question. Again, like any organized crime group, there's loose associations. You had the Italians in the Ocean Hill gang. You had the Jews in the Brownsville gang. Their guys were known to the Manhattan guys. And Lepke Buchalter, he was from Brooklyn, so he knew who some of these guys were. They would do jobs. They were sort of part of the larger combination. And someone, hey, we weren't there, but we kind of assumed there was a conversation at some point between the big guys saying, hey, got these guys over in Brooklyn. They might be pretty good for this. I mean, you know, I'm kind of dramatizing it, but that's basically. And then you bring them in, and it turns out their downfall, which is weird, they did last almost 10 years. I mean, it's amazing they did this for 10
And
years
they killed a
before.
lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot.
But their downfall, which it usually is the arrogance, that pomp and hubris, I guess is a good term for it. These guys got so over the top. I
Yeah.
mean, here's the thing: when you're told to kill somebody, messy or clean, when you light the body on fire and have your girlfriend celebrate with you, that's some crazy. Like that's taking it to the psychopath level versus sociopath. I'm not a psychologist, but you know, you study enough that you meet enough people. There's a really gray area there where you're going from that, and eventually that gets you caught, or gets the larger group caught. Murder Inc. That book, there's already books about Murder Inc. I did that one anecdotal as well. Like, here's some crazy truth is stranger than fiction tales about these guys that actually lived, and they were
There's
in. It's possible they were in Pittsburgh, PA at one point.
yeah.
They were in Chicago, California, Florida. They would go wherever the job was.
Yeah, I've heard some crazy stories of the things that they've done to people, like with ice picks, and
Oh,
they
that
took
was insane.
Gondoria soaked cloth and put it on people's eyes.
All kinds of stuff.
Like
They were going to
that's
use a
insane.
fire axe in a crowded movie theater once. I mean, that one didn't happen. Forget why, but these are the things that extreme.
Gerard wants to know how many of them went to the electric chair.
That's a great question, man. Thank you for asking that. That is probably a show in and of itself. The prosecutors decided they were going to try these people in groups and try to literally fry as many of them as they could in Sing Sing's electric chair.
It's good,
Um,
man.
there was let me count. I'm sorry, I got to think. Lepke went with two others, so that's three, four, five, six, seven, seven total in three different trials, and one or two managed to narrowly get out of it. Chickenhead Garino was tried in a different T. They wanted to give him the death penalty, but he got out, died of a heart attack in jail. Lepke Buchalter to this day is the only mob boss ever put to death by the state. And that is an argument there. Why the death penalty? He wasn't like, it was hearsay that he gave the order. Don't get me wrong, these guys did bad stuff, and it I think the government just quickly wanted to exercise that power and get the headlines. And I say that because Burton Turkis, who was the assistant DA doing most of the prosecutions in New York, he went on to quickly write his own book and do a speaking tour. And look, not that I wouldn't do the same thing, but it's kind of, was this really about justice, or was this about, I'm going to be in every headline from 1940 to 1944 because I had everybody electrocuted? So
Yeah.
whether you agree with the death penalty or not has almost nothing to do with it. It's like, wait, what about justice here? You're just saying, okay, you guys did it, go to the chair. So seven for that. Seven went to the chair. There's Mendy Weiss and the other Capone. He's not related to Al.
They both went to the chair.
Yeah, they went. They went to the electric chair with Lepke Buchalter. There's Lepke.
So he was a top guy in one of the mob families when he
Yes.
was sent to the electric chair. How
Yeah,
come did
the
they
way we figure it worked is you had the development of the Mafia's five families, and in the broader scope, you had the mob commission. Mob being Jewish, Italian, to a lesser extent Irish. All those top guys sat at a board. There was the five family heads and that structure, but there was also for a period a lot of Jewish guys: Meyer Lansky, Benny Siegel, Louis Buchalter, a few others that were on this board.
what pick who are these people in this picture?
That's a great photo. 1931. This was okay. So what you're looking at from don't not the two guys in the back; those are cops. From
Uh,
left to right, Harry Pittsburgh, Phil Strauss. Um, uh, that the other one is Goldstein, then Abe Relis, who became actually the state's witness, and standing up with that evil look, that is Harry Happy Mayone.
so Abrellis is the one that went flying out the window, right?
Yeah,
The
he's
canary
the
that
one
couldn't fly.
actually. Some of my colleagues and peers have told me, in their opinion, he was actually the most brutal of all of them, yet he was the one that turned Stool Pigeon.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's Pittsburgh Phil, Bugsy Goldstein, Kid Twist Relis, and Happy Mayone. And if you haven't figured out why they called him Happy, it's because of that grimace right there.
So did they catch them in the midst of doing a hit? Is that why they got all the weapons?
No, ironically, all four of them plus a couple other guys had already been held in jail for different charges. While they were in jail, a a few things came to the new DA's attention, and he opened the books on 10 years of unsolved murders. And one of these tipsters, there were actually two tipsters, that said, you want to look into these guys.
Yeah.
So they already had the core of the group in custody. They just had no idea how big this was going to blow up.
Yeah, and people were coming forward.
Yeah. Oh, and they were all arrested so many times. This photo is, I forget exactly what they were arrested for at this time, but they were being shown off with all the weapons they found in a locker where these guys hung out. But they were each individually arrested so many times. That was a murder in 1936. Joe, was it Rosen? Forgive me if I get that wrong. He was a candy store owner. That is the guy that his murder was the reason Lepke Buchalter went to the electric chair. Allegedly, hearsay, Lepke said kill that guy. So yeah.
Yeah, they started getting a little crazy with when the guy got caught. He was on TV telling on somebody, and then
Oh, that was after, yeah, Albert
yeah,
Anastasia.
Albert Anastasia had
Albert
him
the
killed.
Mad Hatter. In the 50s, Albert, still a crazy dude, sees some bank robber get arrested. What wasn't that?
Willie Sutton.
Willie Sutton
Yeah.
get arrested, and the guy who ratted him out, a young guy, is on TV. So the story goes, Anastasia tells his people, kill that guy, kill that rat. And they did. Those times were crazy. Again, truth is stranger than fiction.
Just looking at some of these comments.
Yeah. Yeah, they're looking at their guns. Yeah, they were pretty sad.
Yeah, they look a little pissed off in those pictures, man.
XXX, it wasn't a candy store hangout. Yeah, their main headquarters, Murder Inc.'s headquarters, was in the office of a candy shop in Brownsville section of Brooklyn that was owned by a little old lady. She allowed them to do this and made money off of it, they found out. But they ran it out of a candy and cigar confection shop.
A lot of them used to do business out of candy shops back in the days, and flower shops and things like that. I noticed.
The whole concept of a front, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, candy.
It lasted for 10 years. That's a long time to get away with something.
And then the pizza shop connection back into the 70s and all that.
Oh yeah.
Looking at them guns and the bullets. The way they're looking at them guns and the bullets on the table, it looked like they wanted to grab them. Like they're like, oh man, look at his face. He looks like he wants to grab him. Hey, brothers.
You can tell he's looking at him, and Mayone's looking like, I want to kill everyone. Goldstein looks upset. Strauss looks like he's just on another planet.
Doesn't look like fun, man. I've been down that road before, and it's not fun.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I can only imagine it would suck anyway. But those guys, wow, yeah, they were not upstanding citizens, but fascinating stories.
So some of them, I have the story of old Sparky right here with all the people who went in the chair. I think there are 7 of the pictures here. So it tells you how many people died in this electric chair, how many of the mob guys died. So I'll just pull this picture up. Harry Strauss,
Yep.
Martin Goldstein, Louis Capone, Frank. I don't know how to say that name.
Abendando, Frank the Dasher. Yeah.
These are all the guys, right?
Yep. That's it. Those are
It's
the
in Old
ones. But
Sparky, Houston, Sing Sing Prison. New York
that's it.
mass execution of the four men on July 7th, 1891. So they killed all four men at one time in that
Here's
year,
here's
like
a
one after
factoid.
another.
Yep. And here's a little factoid about that. As I was researching for the book, I did not know this. What they would do is they would execute in sets of two or three, and they would try to pick the. They would do it in an order where they would pick the weakest one to go first. Like, for example, Bugsy Goldstein went to the chair before Pittsburgh Phil because he was the most visibly upset and shaken. I didn't even know that this was a real thing until I read about that, and that
So the
specific case.
people who are upset and shaking, they want to put them to death first because
Yep.
they're going to cause a problem, if anything, right?
Yep. Take in how the paper, and don't forget that this was an era too where there was no, they didn't use nice ways of saying anything. It was pretty blunt. The weaker of the two got taken to the chair first. And another thing you'd never see today, even the last, I don't know how many decades, that they so swiftly wanted to do away with these people that they literally took them in pairs. And for Buchalter, that was a trio. Like, execute this one at 11:59 or whatever it was. 10 minutes later, you execute the next one.
Yeah,
And
and you just go right out one
yeah,
after another. So you're
yeah, it
just
wasn't
waiting your turn, and this guy in front of you is about to die, and you got to wait your turn. That's insane, man,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
think
that's how
about.
they did it. For at least in that case. Uh, and again, it doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on with the whole subject of death penalty. To me, it's wow, like that really. They just, here you go, like, okay,
That's got to really mentally mess you up to see the person in front of you going.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
who knows what happens with your mental state after that's all
Um,
done, but
exactly, and I think, again, whole other subject, but just the justice part of it is that I mean, it even makes me sit there and go, "Is that justice?" I mean, I want to see bad, evil people get
yeah, but
whatever.
they were putting cement shoes on people, throwing them
Yeah,
into the water alive. Like they were pretty nasty people, man.
you make a very legit argument. You do. It's just in the bigger justice system, it does. It makes you start to wrestle with, like, oh, should they? Oh, but maybe they deserved it. But would I want that to happen to me? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not saying it's right. It's just the form of justice then seems so. Do these guys even have it? Not that they were innocent by any means, but did they even have remotely a fair trial? That's
Who
what.
knows? They could have. Some of them could have been innocent, and they've been sentenced to death. You never know. It could have been.
Right. Yeah, we weren't there. Granted, I will say this: I'll err on the side of, oh, they did pick the baddest of them to do it to, but it's
Yeah.
kind of screwed up when you see some of the worst is the stool pigeons, and that's the evidence. Like, look, I get it. You bring in a witness, an informant, but when that's one of the worst of the group, which, by the way, who, for those who don't know, Abe Relis was supposed to testify in 1944 and against Lepke, but he ended up going out a six-story window. No one knows how, but he ended up going to his death before he could testify. So
I'll show a picture of him. I'll show a picture of his little flight he took.
yeah, yeah.
His
The
flight path.
canary that sang but couldn't fly. That was a book, actually.
Yeah. I got a picture right here. Well, I showed a picture of him already, but here's a picture of the building. He got pushed out the window.
Yep.
And because he was about to be what, kind of like a witness protection program. They were holding him in this hotel, and he went flying out the window the day before trial.
Yeah. There were several witnesses to Murder Inc. in that hotel, and supposedly a lot of guards. Somehow he still ended up out the window. Nobody knows for sure the story. One of the theories is Frank Costello, the money man in the mob, made sure that guy didn't come out of that hotel alive.
Here I got um Abe Rellis's tombstone right here.
Oh yeah. Yep,
35.
1941. That's it. I was wrong on the date. There you go.
So he was Jewish, right?
Yes. Yeah, Rellis was considered the uh, boss, if you will, of the Brownsville Boys, the largely Jewish segment
Yeah.
of these killers. Yeah,
Well,
and
man, you
Harry
gotta.
Mayone was kind of the boss of the Italian Ocean Hill guys.
Well, you got a great story, man, and I could sit here and talk with you
I know, right?
forever about this stuff, man. I'm intrigued by it. It's a lot of fascinating things. It's got a lot of avenues, and I definitely want to get to more of your story. There's so many different directions we could go. But I wanted you to tell the people where they can get your book and what they got to type in to get your book.
Oh, okay. So again, my website's being rebuilt. So sorry, it's not up yet. Ganglandlegends.com. Hopefully soon. But
Well,
if
I
you want
have
to
that.
follow
That's in
me,
the description. If when you do get it up, the link for that is in the description of this video.
You see, Bill's already got it covered. My tag is at Gangland Legend on all social media. And if you want to buy the books right now, Amazon, just search the Cipollini, the crazy last name, and the comic books. All my books should be there. And hopefully, I just say last thing. Hopefully, my next book that I've been working on for 4 years is going to come to fruition soon. So if any of you have ever heard of El Mano Negra, the California Central Valley Sicario, I got that story coming. I can't say much yet, but yeah, that's yeah. I've got Martinez's memoirs, and putting together, I hope, a really cool book about our homegrown cartel hitman. So
It's awesome, man. I can't wait to read it, man. You got a lot of
thank
good
you.
stuff, and
Yeah, and
I
thanks
think
for
people.
everybody who checked in, man. Thank you. Some great questions too. Sorry I didn't get to all of them.
Hey, it's all right, man. Hey, Gerard, thank you so much for that $5, man. I really appreciate that. But I want to have you on again, and we could get into more of your story and more of some of this mob background, and could get into all of that. But I
Anytime, I
definitely,
appreciate it. No, thank you, Bill, and thank you, everybody. Yeah, please, thank you. You guys are great. Hit me up. I say hello. Yeah, let me know what you guys think.
yeah, I'll put his Facebook in the description of this video if you guys want to check him out and check out his books, man. I hope you guys are all having a great day, and make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. And if you haven't, go check out the merch line that I got. It's in the description of this video. I got new shirts there, and they're pretty cheap. So
No, thank you.
I
Yeah, everybody.
appreciate you guys, man, and I'll see you guys soon. Do you want to give anyone a shout out before we go?
Uh, just you and everybody who tuned into this. You guys, seriously, thank you so much. It makes me want to keep doing what I'm doing. So,
Thanks, man.
all
All right.
right.
Thanks, everybody. And make sure you hit the like, subscribe, notification bell. See you next time. Peace.